Let's talk about the buffer rate for the playback engine in the digital audio workstation. In this instance, we're in Pro Tools. So we can go to Setup, Playback Engine, and we'll see the dialog that shows up and really kind of explains or kind of gives us some visual information about this. So here is our Playback Engine dialog menu, and what we get to do with this is this allows us to change, raise and lower our hardware buffer size. Now it's set up in samples because the way that it's designed is to provide a certain speed, and that speed is called latency. And essentially, that the latency is really more of a delay timing. So if we're recording to the system, we want it to be nice and short. We basically that's the round trip from the interface to the computer being converted into binary from analog. So it's going to digital, and then it's got to be dropped into short-term memory on the RAM, long-term memory on the hard drive, and then brought back essentially. So, well, and truly, I'm sorry, the RAM is really going to hold it until we push stop. And once we push stop, that RAM dumps it off onto the hard drive. It gets printed to the hard drive. So it's going to stay in short-term memory while we're recording. The problem with that is that that works just fine when we're tracking and there's not a lot going on inside of the session. But the problem is when there's a lot going on, when our session is very large or is using very either high track counts, a lot of plugins, heavy loads such as auto-tune or reverb, virtual instruments, or we're just at a high resolution. If we're at a high sample rate or bit depth at like 96K 32-bit, it's going to have a hard time running at super low samples because while it's trying to record you or do that, it's also trying to get the information from the hard drive that's already on the hard drive to the RAM, processed, and to the system so that you can hear it and then convert it out of your interface back to you. So it really weighs heavily on the system. So a lot of times, if I'm starting a session and I don't have a whole lot in it, I can use my lowest sample. Once I start rolling and I got a lot of stuff in it, I'm oftentimes at 256. And then I might have to go from there to as high as I can manage to get as I start to work in processing and editing and mixing. Especially once you get into large mixes. Like for me, if I'm on a mix that's got like 70 plus tracks and I'm processing everything, I get to a point where this just builds up and eventually my playback stops and I have to manage what's being used. And so, but again, it's because it needs time for the RAM to process. So the buffer is really how much time does the RAM have to process. We're going to talk a little bit more about that process, but I just wanted to show you what it actually looks like inside of Pro Tools.